Do you want an easy reminder that this is not a normal election year? Take a look at Donald Trump's schedule this month. Trump is jetting straight from Iowa to New York, where he plans to be in court Thursday for closing arguments in the civil fraud trial over his family business practices. And then it's back to Iowa as if nothing happened, campaigning on Saturday and Sunday ahead of Monday's caucuses. And then next Tuesday, another trial gets underway to determine damages in writer E. Jean Carroll's defamation case against Donald Trump. MSNBC legal analyst Charles Coleman joins us now. He's a former Brooklyn, New York prosecutor. Okay, Charles, I want to talk about Donald Trump and all the legalese things, but before we get there, in the debate tonight, there was this very interesting exchange on crime, and I'd love to play Ron DeSantis' sound for you all, and then we discuss on the other side.
The BLM riots in the summer of 2020. When I saw that happening in Minneapolis, in Florida, I called out the National Guard. We had state law enforcement deployed. We said, you're not burning down our cities in this state. And you know what? It didn't happen. He sat in the White House and tweeted law and order, but he did nothing to ensure law and order. As your president, I will never let our cities burn. You have every right to stop this runaway rioting. As president, in fact, you have a duty. Now, Nikki Haley and I have a disagreement on the BLM stuff, too, because she tweeted during this period of time that the death of George Floyd should be, quote, personal and painful for each and every American. But people in Iowa had nothing to do with that, or Florida or South Carolina. She was virtue signaling to the left. She was accepting the narrative, and she was trying to impress people who were never going to like us. I never bought into going after the police. We back the blue to the hilt in the state of Florida, and we have lower crime as a result.
There was a lot there.
There's a lot there.
Charles, a lot of talk about crime, and it was a question actually about would you deploy troops like Donald Trump said he would to curb violent crime. They talked about riots. Ron DeSantis said a lot about riots, nothing about January 6th.
Right. Very interesting. I mean, I think that Alicia was alluding to the notion of being on Earth 1 and us being on, and them being on Earth 2. And on Earth 1, we have seen over and over again this issue of crime become racialized. And you saw this when they answered the question, because both of them made this fantastic pivot almost immediately to the BLM riots and the imagery that is provoked when you're talking about it. And Ron DeSantis used the language in hyperbole of saying, well, this was the most outrageous series of riots that our country has ever seen, never mentioning, to your point, January 6th, which I thought was interesting. This was very clearly signaling to their base, hey, we understand what the problem with crime is. It's these BLM people, it's these rioters. And it's so fascinating for me to watch that when you have a conversation about crime in America, the immediate response is about muting the response to police violence. And that is very, very troublesome, but very much so on brand for everyone in the Republican Party right now.
Crime is down.
There's also a reference that Ron DeSantis made in that remark to those people are never going to like us. And it's not clear to me who the us is. Is the us Republicans? Is the us white Americans? What was the divide exactly that he was trying to drive?
Well, that's not necessarily for us to know. What you can rest assured is that the us is not sitting at this table. The us was sitting in the audience and presumably watching on television because that's the audience that they were playing to. And they understood very clearly the coded language that Ron DeSantis attempted to use. The other thing that I thought was so fascinating about that, Alicia, was that in this conversation about law and order, in this conversation about the need to sort of maintain and preserve the notion of law and order, there was no discussion of the fact that their opponent is currently facing 91 felony counts in various indictments in jurisdictions across the country. And so I found it such hypocrisy, if you will, to sort of have this penchant around the notion of law enforcement, supporting law enforcement, and upholding the law. And you have someone whom both of you all, by the way, are supposed to be competing against, and you said nothing about the legal entanglements that Simone just referenced.
To say nothing of the violent insurrection that happened on January 6th.
Well, there's that little
police
thing.
And law enforcement were disregarded on that day.
Exactly. And that whole sequence with respect to law and order, I back the blue,
right,
and all of that. How do you think, given what lies ahead, as Alicia laid out at the opening here, the next few days, the trials again resume in earnest in the midst of this caucus taking place, that the judicial system knowing that that's going to be the game going forward. This back and forth between the political theater, right, that happens with Trump and the theater he wants to make out of these courtrooms. What's the preparation for that you think prosecutors, judges, courtrooms all should be considering right now?
Well, Michael, I think it's an interesting volley because we've been processing these things in a vacuum as though they are sort of like on two different tracks. And what we are starting to really see is that for Donald Trump and the way that he's approaching it, it's all one thing.
Right.
It's an entire campaign. When I go to court in New York, whether it's a civil trial or whether it's a criminal indictment in Georgia or in Florida or in D.C., I'm making a campaign stop because now I'm standing up and instead of being prosecuted, I'm being persecuted and I'm fighting for you. I'm being the martyr for you all as victims. And so it becomes one huge circus. And as a prosecutor, when you're in that space, what you have to do is understand, look, I need to do my job and focus on what it is and ultimately getting these convictions. You're not concerned with and can't afford to be concerned with whatever the political ramifications may end up being.
But just to follow up on that, but there are political ramifications to that. We've witnessed real time judges being threatened, prosecutors being threatened. So the general public is responding to this circus maximus that's taking place by Donald Trump. You're telling me there's no consideration of that in terms of sitting down and trying to figure out not just how do I protect my people, but then how do I prosecute this case in the face of what he's trying to do?
What you've just hit on is the challenge if you are a prosecutor in a case like this. And one of the reasons that Donald Trump has been so aggressive in terms of his messaging and trying to apply pressure to the judicial system in terms of what he talks about, who he talks about, and how he talks about these things is because he wants to paint people into a corner and force them to make a call. What we've seen, for example, in New York with Judge Engoron is this limitation around what he can say. You've also seen it with Judge Chuckton as well in D.C. He's doing that on purpose because as a prosecutor, now you have to make the decision, how much of this do I want to argue about? Because if I argue about it too much, I may potentially create another issue for him to appeal and further delay where we're trying to go in terms of securing a conviction.
But has the legal community writ large just been too afraid to do the thing as it relates to Donald Trump? Because if he was any other defendant, anyone else, he would be sitting in a jail cell right now for the things that he has said. Like this week, America literally could hear, if they just typed in on Google, his lawyers claiming that he has presidential immunity from prosecution because he wasn't impeached and convicted by the political process. They literally stood in there and said, well, yeah, he could assassinate someone, and unless he was impeached and convicted, they shouldn't be able to do anything now.
I don't know that the legal community at large has been hesitant to do that. I think that among lawyers, many people have said, look, this guy does not have a way out. He's facing a dead end. Although we do understand that his attorneys have an ethical obligation to exhaust every legal remedy possible in defense of their client. I think what you're talking about really speaks to the bench, because there's not a judge in America, and this is a dirty little secret that people don't want to admit, who really wants to be responsible for putting Donald Trump in jail. Wow. There are a number of both political and practical considerations that come with a decision like that I don't necessarily know any judge wants to take on because it has a host of different implications.
Political and practical considerations that they are only making for Donald Trump.
Thank you. That's where I draw a big line.
Well, we will discuss it. We will discuss it. Charles Comer Jr., thank you very much.
Thank you much.
We appreciate your time. Thank you. Thank you.